like to call the meeting of Willits City Council for February 12th, 2020 to order. And please join me in the pledge. How do you begin? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Councilmember Connie?
Here.
Rodriguez?
Present.
Strong?
Here.
Stransky?
Yes.
Mayor Gonzalez?
here. So I've been asked, and therefore I'm making a motion to move closed session item 13B, conference with labor negotiations pursuant to Government Code 54957.6. Agency negotiator Stephanie Garabrand Sierra, city manager Karen Stevenson, human resource analyst, employee organization, police department, POA, forward at this time. So I'd like to move that closed session forward.
Do you want to do it before or after public comment?
Was that?
Did you want to do it before or after public comment?
Well,
I would suggest we do it after because there's quite a few people here
all right.
specifically.
So tell you what, I'll take public comment right now.
Is it possible for, we all want to hear very much what you all have to say, but we can hardly hear out here.
Okay, I was discussing moving something from closed session later in the meeting to the front of the meeting.
Okay.
But my colleagues up here have suggested that we maybe open it up for public comment first before we convene.
So is it okay
so-
if we hear you though?
Okay. These microphones don't amplify our voices for the TV, so I will speak louder.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank
All
you.
right. So at this point, I'll open it up to public communication. The council welcomes participation in its meetings. Comments shall be limited to 3 minutes per person so that everyone may be given an opportunity to be heard. To expedite matters and avoid repetition, whenever any group of persons wishes to address the council on the same subject matter, the mayor may request that a spokesperson be chosen by the group. This item is limited to matters under the jurisdiction of the City Council which are not on the posted agenda. Public criticism of the City Council, commissions, boards, and agencies will not be prohibited. No action shall be taken. So is there anybody from the public that would like to speak? And please step up and state your name.
My name is Mark Herbert. I'm alarmed and concerned by the pressures that are on our city law enforcement. They affect us all, those pressures. I understand that the ability to pay in this city is lesser than it is in other communities, but I feel as if this department has suffered an unfair disadvantage in regard to the Sheriff's Department, who has obviated. There are several former employees from this department who serve with the Sheriff's Department, and I was very alarmed to read in a newspaper that typically covers nostalgia that our Chief of Police has warned us that we may in fact lose the ability to have localized law enforcement, and that's alarming to me. This is a very small community, and yet, we know we live in a modern age of grave largesse. And I would personally advocate stronger support for our law enforcement. They're working egregious numbers of hours. I don't know how these men are able to even focus. They're spending far too much time away from their families, and they protect our families. Thank you for your time.
Would anybody else like to speak on something not on the agenda?
Good evening. My name is Jane Camp, and I'd like to speak on Measure B. I realize that you've not yet been officially approached by either the Measure B committee or the county regarding using the old hospital as a wellness center, but we wanted to let you know how strongly many of us feel that it would be a good thing to have in Willits. We think that it could not just be a help for those in crisis, but also has lots of room to provide learning skills for those people that need to complete the rehabilitation who've been experiencing difficulties, and others will present their ideas in that regard. So many of us here, I feel, in this room, and certainly myself, have been very fortunate in our lives, and we have the possibility here to do something for those who are less than fortunate. And in doing so, I think we would also have a chance to help our town rise out of the current challenges. Thank you.
Do I have to hit?
Nope, it'll just beep and you don't need to.
No.
Okay. Notice they brought it out for me. They must know me. Hi, I'm Emmy Good, and this is my 3-minute vision, and I wrote it so that it would be 3 minutes. I may have to read fast. As I entered the old Howard Hospital, I experienced a wave of feelings. Many family members and friends' lives were helped and saved here. This old building is filled with loving memories and such potential. I was pleasantly surprised to see how clean and well kept the building is. Over 30,000 square feet of space on over 3 acres that have been beautifully maintained. I took about 60 photos. I was going to bring in these great big posters and share them with you, but 3 minutes. So, first, we'd like to think of this as the Howard Memorial Mental Wellness Center, offering a wide range of professional treatment and counseling services and activities that promote good mental health. Residential programs are ideally suited to this property. There are 14 bay-windowed windows with bathrooms and pleasant views. This is not the PUF unit that takes the most serious. These are the ones who are there for extended stays, 3 to 6 months, where they can actually go through rehab programs. Good mental health begins with good health, which begins with good nutrition. Classes in cooking, nutrition, supplements, and diet can be here. The kitchen has the potential to become a culinary arts training program, in addition to feeding the staff, clients, and visitors. The Seabiscuit Cafe could offer healthy food to go. There are conference rooms for meetings and support groups that could be used for the needs of infants to seniors. There's plenty of room for services for those who are dealing with substance abuse, depression, psychological needs, homelessness, unwed mothers, abusive situations, and more. Because of a lack of time to expand on these exciting ideas for using this space to promote wellness, here is just a list of intriguing thoughts. A variety store, a thrift craft store where items made by clients could be sold, a hair salon or barbershop, classes in knitting, crocheting, handicrafts, use of herbs and growing herbs on site, cleansing and detox programs, body work, relaxation techniques, yoga, tai chi, qigong, juggling, meditation, dance and movement, drama, music, and art therapy, and game rooms, pet therapy. Just think of what makes you happy and healthy. This is a kind and caring community, and we can help the Measure B funding with county support and perhaps state matching funds and grants to do something very special right here in Willits, and it may give people a reason not to bypass this town or to bypass this opportunity.
You made it, Emmy. Would anybody else like to come up and speak?
Hi, my name is Sherry Ebyam. I'm a former teacher and retired Chief Financial Officer of a school district. The Kemper report was commissioned by the county to do an analysis of the Mendocino County Behavioral Health System program and to provide recommendations for the allocation of Measure B revenues. In its strategic budget plan, the report outlined the use of Measure B funds to be used in 2 areas. First, the construction of new facilities and/or the renovation of existing facilities for the purposes of a psychiatric health facility, a crisis residential treatment facility, and a crisis stabilization unit. Secondly, and expansion of current mental health programs. It is the first of these two areas that I would like to address. Willits has been harshly impacted by the freeway bypass, losing many businesses and jobs because of it. Is it possible to consider supporting our communities at the same time as we implement Measure B projects? With this in mind, I believe that if our council members let Measure B committee members know that they strongly encourage the use of the old Howard Hospital and advocate this position to the Measure B committee, it would help towards seeing the old Howard Hospital used as a mental health facility to become a reality. At the last Measure B meeting, I expressed this and encouraged the Measure B committee to always include community in its decisions. Community is one draw for many of us living here in Mendocino County, and using the old Howard Hospital is a great step toward that end. I encourage our City Council to identify which tasks it is willing to undertake toward this end, and to determine which members will step up to promote the use of the old Howard Hospital. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak?
Yeah, I'll say something.
Hi, my name is Sally Rolacek. I work at Willits Daily Bread, the soup kitchen. And basically, I'm just going to say a few words in support of the Howard Hospital building being used possibly for a mental health facility. And what I have to say is a mental health treatment center at the old Howard Hospital in Willits would give the city a way to care for her most vulnerable citizens, those who need special care and help, with respect and compassion right here in town. What a wonderful thing. Thank you.
And would anybody else like to speak? All right.
May I wait for this voice?
Yeah, and state your name and then...
I will. Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Linda Posner, and I have the honor of, for many, many years, lived in Willits for almost 40 years, except when I went to San Francisco for my chaplaincy residency at St. Francis Memorial Hospital, where I became a certified chaplain and came back to Willits to do what I can and serve here. And I have the honor of facilitating several wonderful groups here, a Parkinson's group, a cancer support group, a Life Changes group, Caregivers Circle group, where we give support to each other. And what I'm noticing is that there are so many of us that are seeing how oftentimes, I was working with a woman, for example, and she was in crisis, and she wasn't dangerous to herself, and she wasn't dangerous to her family, but she was really struggling. And I got on the phone and must have made at least 12 to 15 calls in our county to try, in our community, to try to figure out, Ukiah, where could she go? She ended up having to go to Santa Rosa. And I just don't want to keep seeing us, shoot our own feet when we keep sending people out of our community and bringing supposed experts in when we have so many people in this community that have so many resources and skills that just want to serve this community. And so this woman ended up going to Santa Rosa, and her family had to drive back and forth to visit her, and made me sad that I couldn't somehow facilitate her staying in this community, at least this area, and getting some kind of support services. So I am so in favor of this hospital, our old hospital, being just a beautiful beacon of light in this community to bring people in and not send people out to do their fabulous life skills and to serve. Thank you so much.
Would anybody else like to speak?
My name is Bill Barksdale. Thank you. I just want to quickly add, I have a friend, someone that we all know, who is in all three of the facilities that our county sends people with mental health crisis to. And I was recently speaking with him, and he told me that not one single one of those 3 facilities provided any kind of treatment for the people who were there. They provided a place to sleep and food for the time that they were sent there, and nothing else. I know that there are many people in the community, or at least some, that are concerned about the Howard Hospital facility being used as a mental health facility. It is not an appropriate place for what's called a PUF unit, those people who are the most disturbed, who require a lockup facility, but it's certainly appropriate for people who need short-term stabilization, could be used for that. And as Emmy pointed out, all of the bedroom units there have bay windows, they're pleasant, they're sunlit. It could be a great facility for that. One of the alternatives I've heard for that facility is to tear the building down, and I think that would be a great shame. And we have a facility. Right now, the County of Mendocino is chasing a $500,000 grant, and that says that the facility must be in Orchard Street. $500,000 represents less than 1 month of revenue from the Measure B income, which is currently bringing in anywhere from $700,000, and I believe in the month of December it brought in $1 million in revenue. That's what I've heard. So there are now over $12 million, is my understanding, in the bank. There's been not one dime in 2.5 years spent on treatment of people with mental health. All of the money and all of the discussion that I've heard, and I have been to some Measure B meetings, has been about buildings, about real estate. And I think that's a shame. I think we need to be discussing treatment, and I think the Howard Hospital could give us a place that could offer multiple opportunities to have things like discussion groups, the homeless shelter type of people, people who are experiencing domestic abuse. Many different things could come under that roof, and those funds could be shared so that financing could be sustained. There's $46 million allotted for the next 10 years. I think the Howard Hospital could be a great place to have a wonderful start to make that a good facility to help people with mental health. Thank you.
Good evening, Tom Allman, a former county employee. Thank you for being the local legislative branch of government. Thank you. You know, mental health is not on your lap or in your shoulders right now, but Howard Hospital is in your city. I'm on Measure B committee, of course, but I'm not speaking for Measure B. I'm speaking for Tom Allman. I've lived in the city lived in the Willits Valley for a third of a century. And I've seen the ups and downs of the economy, whether we're going to depend on logging or depend upon a power plant we voted on many years ago. We're going to depend on tourism. We're going to depend on, you know, the cannabis, you name it. We're dependent on something that's there that is going to be an economic driver. And I'm not here to say that using Old Howard Hospital is the perfect answer. But think of this, if there was a building in somebody's city, and let's say there were 30 mental health technicians there, that building has a salary of $3 million a year. And you look at the restaurants and you look at the boarded up shops that we have in Willits, and I'm saying that while it's not up to you to say yes and it's not up to Measure B to say yes, I think there is a time that we could sit down and say maybe, and answer questions. And I didn't organize this. I got an email yesterday that said they're going to be here, so I wanted to come and listen. And I certainly appreciate those of you who are speaking on this. But if we're going to be a society that accepts all of us, we need to treat all of us here locally. And when you send someone out of the area and they're treated out of the area, they're not going to be treated in their final treatment with the doctors, their professionals that they were initially treated with. And we have the ability right now to utilize Old Howard Hospital in a way that we could all be proud. And I don't want public safety compromised. I certainly, if there was any chance of public safety being compromised, I wouldn't be up here talking about this. I think there's a way we could do this. So once again, thank you for your service. You know, you're not sitting up there for the money. I know that. You're sitting up there to make Willits better. And I'm telling you right now, I'm just asking for a maybe, and we can make Willits better. Thank you very much.
Would anybody else like to speak?
My name is Elizabeth Rydell, and I also would like to see Howard Hospital used. I know that a lot of people have been worried about bringing more people in, but from what I can see and from the many people that I know around here, we have lots of people that need help in different ways, and bringing in an income, I think, would be tremendously helpful to the city and to the people. I mean, to me, it seems like a win-win if we can encourage this to happen here. I know that people have talked about the schools, but I also have been told that our superintendent is all for it, and that's not an issue for him at all, who I think, well, he knows a lot more about it than I ever would. And I've lived in different places that were near mental health places, and in the different cities that I've lived in at different times. And it's never, actually those places were living in those neighborhoods were some of the safest places I felt that I lived in some of these places. So, because everybody does know what's going on and who's there, and it's just not an issue. They're usually watched more. It's just much safer. So I think for our own citizens, it would be really nice if we could encourage this to happen. And I realize this isn't your job, and I thank you for the jobs that you do, and I just think we need money and we need care. And it seems to me like a great possibility to put the two together. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak on this or anything else?
Yes, thank you. Mark Herbert, I've heard many people here discussing passionately the use of the Howard Hospital, and yet it seems engineering-wise that building is not a viable building. It's 14 rooms. The Van Hotel, that's totally secure, it's viable, it's not going to fall down. Does it have 80 rooms in it? It's not within a half a block of a school. Holly Heights is probably the most impacted police presence in the community. There are barely sidewalks down there for the children to walk to school. And I feel as if the encouragement of using the Howard Hospital purely for the source of revenue over the idea of mental health is egregious to me. We should be focusing on the needs of those who are needy. We shouldn't be focusing on the fact that this might be a win for the individual who owns the family. The property's been for sale for years. If anybody was interested, they would have bought it. It's obviously not a viable property. The majority of the property isn't even a building. And I feel as if bringing a facility as diminutive, as small, with the inability to serve a greater community, 14 beds, that's silly, as opposed to a building that is so much larger, centrally located. We could talk about putting the park in Mr. Padula's parking lot there. And it's away from schools. It's away from one of the most crime-ridden parts of the city that is lacking in infrastructure. And it's an inadequate facility. And I would like to see these monies serve the needs of the mental health community. We're a large, sporadic community. I've heard many discussions about a central facility. Satellite communities are what we need. Covolo's way the heck out there. We've got all these remote, most of us are unincorporated in this county. And I feel as if bringing into Willits solely for a financial gain that's unseemly to me. We should be focused on mental health. And the greatest bang for our buck with those tax dollars that we're pulling in. And I understand that people are impassioned. It's a beautiful property, but it is not, in my opinion, and in an engineer's opinion, a viable property at this point in time. Thank you.
All right. Do I have anybody else that wants to speak on this or anything else? Otherwise, at this point, I will close public comment.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and community of Willits. My name is Larry Halstead, and I'm here for the first time to, first of all, foremost, introduce myself as one of your newer members of the community. My family relocated here a year ago, middle of January, after being survivors of the Paradise Campfire. And that really is the other reason why I came here tonight, is that the survivors, not just of the Paradise Campfire, but all of the fires, at the time of the Paradise Fire, there was 17 of them PG&E caused. I'm a Southern California transplant, and we were fighting the story down in Hinckley with PG&E and the Aaron Brockovich story. PG&E is a terrorist organization, and it needs to be stopped. And there's not enough stuff being done for the survivors. The Paradise Campfire was the most deadly fire in California history. 86 people are confirmed to have lost their lives. We believe that number to be a lot higher because of the homeless situation. PG&E's immediate reaction was to jump into bankruptcy and declare what they thought our total losses would be, which they put at $16.3 billion. And then the next thing that happened was they decided that, FEMA should get reimbursed, and the insurance company should get reimbursed, and the OES should get reimbursed. FEMA wanted $7.6 billion. Now they're saying, they'll take maybe 3.5. Meanwhile, while we do have attorneys representing us, our attorneys do not represent our viewpoints. Our attorneys are going for these settlement offers that are put forth by bondholders and creditors. We're putting profits ahead of the people and the victims. We're lucky to have found a house. We're paying twice the rent we were up in Brook Trails as we were in Paradise, but we're way better off than a huge number of people that are living out of cars and tents and moldy trailers. And meanwhile, PG&E is hiding in the bankruptcy court. And so what I would ask is that this council lend some support as we fight. I was just 2 weeks ago, I went down to join a protest in Sacramento, and we ended up able to meet with the governor's office, and we met with his two top legislative and policy aid people. And they're very sympathetic, and as you may well know, Governor Newsom is really wanting to take over PG&E, something that I support.
Your time is done, sir.
So anyway, just to finish up, I'd like to see the council come out with some resolutions to support Make Victims First, and also the council should start making plans for having their own contingency plan on energy.
All right, last call for anybody. Okay, I'm going to close public comment now, and I want to just point something out. At the last meeting I spoke up about this, and both Larry and I have been attending the Measure B meetings, either both or one of us make sure to go there, because what happened early on was that it was our local newspapers that alerted us to the fact that plans were being made, and it sounded like pretty definite plans. And from our standpoint, the community hadn't been heard, and we hadn't seen those. And in reality, what has to happen is that the county brings forth, no different than you bringing forth a house or a business you're going to do, and it goes through our review process. And I have yet to see a project come through. And I've talked with some of you already, and and I haven't made up my mind because I haven't seen a project to make up my mind about. And so I have concerns depending on what would go there, but honestly, it would be irresponsible of me to kind of speculate and say I've decided I don't want it or I want it, because I haven't seen a plan yet. And that's why we started attending the meeting, so that we would get there. And one of the first things I did when we started attending was we asked, can Measure B meet in the outlying communities, Willits, Fort Bragg, etc.? Because a lot of people here don't make the trip over to Ukiah. I mean, me and Larry carpool and go down there, but there are a lot of people that have a hard time getting down there, either to speak in for or against or whatever. But the sheriff left before I could thank him again. But at the last meeting they had here in January, I thanked him for finally they convened a meeting over. They did it at Howard Hospital. I think the venue was probably a little too small, but they at least tried there. And then there was talk about them doing one over on the coast. While that might be a pain in the butt for me to go to the coast to that meeting, I think they owe it to the coast, just like they owed it to this community, so people can see what is or isn't happening with Measure B. And I mean, it's our sales tax money that's going there, and I think it's important that the process be out there open and transparent. And so when people ask me, are you for it or against it? I said, I think that, again, my pat answer is I haven't seen a project yet, and again, whether you wanted to put in I tell you what, a power plant or a slaughterhouse, either one might have merits one way or things plus and minus, and you'd want to mitigate any concerns you have, any project you have, whether it be traffic, noise, et cetera, the neighborhood, et cetera, and give the opportunity for the public to come in during some sort of public hearing process to speak like you're speaking today. So I kind of wanted to kind of throw that out there, that when people try to kind of pin us up, we haven't seen a project. In fact, we went to the point of even doing a records request with the county. And again, that's because I'm glad our newspapers were vigilant out there and letting us know, and maybe folks were getting ahead of themselves without doing it. So again, I'm not going to cast stones on the process down there. It is what it is. It's just that I just want to make sure that our local residents have an opportunity to weigh in on it, just like we want an opportunity when it finally comes to us to weigh in on it. So.
Will the project, if the county funds it, will it be like other projects within the county?
I really can't, I can't discuss this any further. I just wanted to kind of explain what we...
about an EIR, because they're absolved from following the environmental impact.
Isn't an agenda item.
Yeah, it's not, so we can't really, I just wanted to kind of speak way out. So we can talk offline if you want. Okay. All right, so at this point, I had made a motion earlier to move closed session item 13B up on the agenda. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All right.
Who was the first?
Can I ask if there's a necessity to do that? Because,
Yeah.
yes.
It shouldn't be taking real long time.
Any further discussion? Otherwise, I'll call for the vote. Kathy?
Councilmember Connie?
Sure.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Strong?
Yes.
Stransky?
Yes.
Mayor Gonzalez?
Yes. So the meeting will be in recess, and the council will convene in closed session regarding item 13B. We'll reconvene later on in open session and report out if we have anything to report out. All right, back in session, and again, I reported out that we've given direction to the city manager to come back with some information for us on what we were discussing. All right, public matters presentation by Moss, Levy, and Hartzheim regarding comprehensive audited financial report.
And we're looking for a finance director who took a break.
Is there some folks from Moss and Levy that are going to be here?
No, they're going to be appearing by phone.
Oh, okay, well then, a consideration of cities, how about we just bump to 3B?
Is she coming?
She's on the way.
Oh, is she? Okay, well then we'll,
Okay, great. or maybe 5? Something quick to keep moving?
Yeah, what about 9 to 5?
Yeah, consent calendar. We have item A, council member minutes, January 8th and the 22nd. Item B, award contract to Bob Nishiyama, investigation for law enforcement background services, an amount not to exceed $10,000. Award a contract to Klein Investigations for law enforcement background investigation not to exceed $10,000. And award contract to Tufts Polygraph investigation for law enforcement background investigation not to exceed $10,000. Destruction of old city records related to the investigation remediation of contamination of former Remco hydraulics facility. And so,
Make
I
the
so
motion.
moved.
Can we pull item E just for some discussion?
All right, we'll pull item E.
I'll second the motion for A through D, pull item E.
Yes, just a minute.
Okay.
All right, so items A through D,
And Sabrina made the motion?
No, Larry did.
Larry, and you
Second.
seconded, and Greta wanted E pulled.
Yeah.
All right, so,
Councilmember Connie,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Strong,
Yes.
Stransky,
Yes.
Mayor Gonzalez.
yes. Now, item E, destruction of old city records related investigation and remediation and contamination of former Remco hydraulics facility.
Yes, I put this on the agenda. We have a situation where these records that have been in storage in Ukiah since 2006 have to be removed by the end of the month. They're at a place called Silver Spoon Storage on Ore Springs Road in Ukiah. That business is going out of business, and they've told us that they can have a shredding company come and take care of them, or that we need to take care of them and get them out of there by March 1, 2 weeks. So we've got just a very short period of time to do something with them, and I know that there's some historical interest in those records. However, I believe that the vast majority of everything that we have in storage is available through the trust, through their document depository. For years and years, the trust rented a little house building on Main Street, just about Highway 20, where they had someone on staff and they had the records there, and the public could go in and look at records. A few years back, they went and put it all online, and they no longer have them physically available. But all of the records related to the litigation and the water board's review and the orders that were issued and the compliance, the remediation, all of that information is available to the public.
And is that the trust's website?
Yeah, the WillitsTrust.org website. They have a link to a document depository. And just today, I receive emails about when new documents are available. And just today, there was a report of this past year's water extraction procedures that have gone on in this past year and what the results of that were. And so whatever is filed with the court, whatever is filed with the regional board, whatever the trust has to prepare, that all gets collected and put online and is available. So I think there's really very little in storage that's not available to the public.
And all of these records that are in storage are up to 2006.
That's right.
So everything since then is definitely elsewhere available.
Right, we're only talking about records between 1995 and 2006. 1995 is when Remco went out of business and filed bankruptcy, and the whole contamination was discovered. And then for the following 9 years of the early investigation and litigation. But at this point, the statute of limitations has passed. Hundreds of people filed suit against Remco for their injuries and damages, and all of that litigation was resolved years ago, and it's not possible at this late date to commence anything new. And at this point in time, the Remco facility is nearly clean enough where they can have it occupied, and it's being used today. And there's really kind of minimal efforts going on to clean it up, and it's guaranteed Pepsi's going to pay for every last bit of work to clean this up until the point of time where the regional board issues a no further action letter. and the court dismisses the litigation, and the trust is dissolved, Pepsi's on the hook to do that. So
until that happens, these records would be available through the trust?
yeah, that's right, and there just hasn't been any interest in them. I was involved in having these records removed and stored there in 2006, and that year, one gentleman came 3 times and spent several hours looking through the boxes, and that's the only person in all of those years who's ever asked to look at them.
Do we have any, do we have any legal responsibility because they're historic? There may be some historical documents to store, or the public is asked, does the city have a responsibility, even though they're available on the trust site, do we have a responsibility to make those available to the public?
No, if we determined that these had unique historical value, and I don't know that you can make that finding since they're also available online, but if there was something unique about them that they ought to be preserved for the sake of history, maybe the museum would have some interest in them, and if they did, they could have them, I suppose, if you're comfortable offering them. But it's basically a space problem, you know. It's 70 cardboard banker's boxes. We're talking about thousands of pages of paperwork that's digitally
Jim, since you
available.
mentioned museum, I'm sorry. If we offered it to the museum and told them this is what the constraints are, and if you guys want them for historical reasons, otherwise they're online, is that?
That would be fine, and so I would suggest that you make a motion to authorize the action that was requested, that they be destroyed or removed at no cost to the city.
Actually, Rena.
So I just wanted to say I'm on the Museum Advisory Board, and they're trying to de-acquisition right now, not take more in. So I can't imagine they would want 70 boxes of paperwork. But I just had a question, so when we file taxes, everyone, at home, you have your tax return, and then you have all the supporting documentation, your bank statements and yada yada. Is it possible that these boxes may have things that are akin to the tax return, where you might want to keep that and get rid of all the supporting drafts, so that we could consolidate it from 70 to something more manageable?
No, I don't think so. I think the key documents are the court orders and the orders from the regional board and the responses that the trust made to demands for certain plans and so forth. And those are all intact, and those are all available. And the other documents that might be in those files are correspondence and insurance policies, by the way, these boxes have all been purged of any confidential attorney-client communications, or it's just basically what's available through the trust.
I move that we pass item 5E with the addition that Jim just suggested, that if somebody comes forward before March 1st and wants to take them off our hands for free, that's not the best wording, but the way Jim said it.
At no cost to the city.
At no cost to the city. So, yeah, so that we authorize the destruction of those old records.
Do I have a second?
Can I just ask a clarification on that? Is that legal? If somebody from the community said, I want to take those 70 boxes, can we do that?
I've been thinking about that, and I can't think of any reason really why it wouldn't be. If we're saying these have no value to us, there's no public benefit for us to keep them, and we're going to put them in an incinerator, or we're going to have them chopped up and thrown away, then and my representation is that there's nothing confidential or harmful to the city that's within those records, then I don't see that we have any cause to complain if we want to give them up to somebody.
Okay, thank you.
So at this point, I have a motion, no second yet.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any further discussion?
I'd like to hear from the public if there's anybody here.
Just the vote.
Thank you again for your time. I have gone to the website. I have called. I have other friends who have called, who tried to access the website. They're supposed to call you back within 24 hours. I called in June. I got a return phone call last week. My friend Amanda Nodal called the same day in June. She's been calling incessantly, so she got several phone calls from the person who's in charge of the remediation trust. What you may or may not be aware of is that in order to access those files, you have to have a computer. It's not, all the information is not on the website. It has to be downloaded into a PDF. You have to have computer skills. You have to have a computer. The files are not there. The trust is not in compliance. If these documents have been completely reviewed and there is nothing germane, of course, it seems silly that we spend $10, let alone $70 a month to store them. But I don't hear that that has been addressed. What I hear is destroy, destroy, destroy. Remco destroyed this community for a larger part. Pepsi has been claiming to pay for remediation for decades. It's obvious to many people in this community that the person who is occupying that business is a former member of this city government who is enjoying that property for his own financial largesse. I feel, as well as many of my constituents, that to destroy these documents lends, again, inordinate favoritism to the current occupants, is in violation of the spirit of trust for the cities of Willits and its citizens, and in the actual settlement. And no, you cannot access the information online readily. It is not possible. Not today. I tried. Thank you.
Well, I tried myself, and I was able to access documents on my computer, so I don't know what the difficulty was. I pulled up some correspondence from 1996, just yesterday, looking on the website.
Can I ask, since you still have some time, quick question? I understand that sometimes it can be hard if you don't have a computer, but I was thinking about the counter argument. If you've got 70 boxes in storage, it seems like it would be much harder to go through 70 boxes and find what you're looking for. That's like finding a needle in a haystack as well. Do you agree?
No.
No.
No, I do not. I think 70 boxes can be sorted through rather diligently, through skilled, especially through a scientific mind. I think that it's been very easy to brush this issue to the side, say it's ancient history, and it's not. It's affecting the community today. It's affecting the community today. And city monies have been spent in order to clear that property, in spite of the fact that a business was interested in going in there that brings $1.6 million to the county. Unbeknownst to me, the railroad brings $1.6 million in 2015 to this community. I'd like to know how much money those tenants have brought to this community since 2005. And that's the valuation that you're talking about. You're talking about fiscal responsibility, you're talking about judicial responsibility, and responsibility to the constituents to keep them safe. If there is absolutely nothing there, why has it been stored for so long? Because we have a legal responsibility to store it and to review it, to make certain that there isn't an issue that's being overlooked. Otherwise, it appears again that this council is contributing to the largesse of an individual in this community that served on this body. Thank you.
All right, anybody else from the public that would like to speak? Then I'll bring it back up here. I have a motion and a second.
Yeah, just a comment. I think that the issue you're raising is different than storage of these boxes of ancient records that, go up to 2006. So that's already, 14 years ago, more than that. And all of that was already litigated, and all of that was already, has been dealt with for the last 14 years. So I don't think that getting, stopping the storage of these archaic archives is going to affect the concerns that you're raising. And those are, so I don't see them being connected, and that we're not doing a cover-up. If only, 3 people have ever accessed it?
One person came 3 times.
Came 3 times in the last 14 years, and it just doesn't seem like an issue.
And and over the years, I've thought about, at some point in time, we've got to do something about these records. At some point in time, it doesn't make sense to continue to store them. And maybe I can bring this before the council to get permission to do something with them. And I thought, well, let's leave them there until the remediation is done. Let's leave them there until the property is sold. And all of that we're at that point now. And now we get a letter, we get notice from the owner of the facility, get them out of there.
The owner of the storage facility.
Storage facility.
And, you know, with taxes, you have to save stuff for 7 years. You don't have to save it forever after 7 years. Your statute of limitations is over. So I'm okay with the motion.
Clarifying question, I know we have a motion to the consent calendar item E, but you had mentioned earlier that we would need to make a resolution. I don't see.
I have a resolution that's moved.
Oh, okay.
So we would just add to that resolution the
Okay.
alternative of allowing removal
By an
So you
interested
just
party.
add to
to
the
interested
existing
party
one.
at no cost to the city.
So,
First come, first served.
and I'm still okay with offering it to the museum, even though I know that they're, just so that in the interest of transparency, if it's important enough and historical value and the archivers want to keep it, then so be it. Otherwise, I know you can go to the public library and use their computer and PDF it.
And I will say, I also accessed the website yesterday, and you don't have to download it as a PDF. You can actually view the documents online, and I was also able to view multiple documents. So, I mean, they're there.
All right. Call for the vote.
Councilmember Connie?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Strong?
Yes.
Stransky?
Yes.
Mayor Gonzalez?
Yes. All right. So now, June, you're on.
Yes. Actually, I have our managing auditor online, and so he will do this presentation. I think.
All right.
You did? Yeah, your turn.
Okay, should I start?
Yep.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, yeah, good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. My name is Ben from Levy and Hartzheim, and I'm the manager that was in charge of the City of Willits 18-19 audit, and I am presenting the CAFR for the fiscal year 18-19, along with a summary of financial highlights for the year. So unfortunately, we had a scheduling conflict that didn't allow me to present the CAFR in person. I'd like to apologize for that. If you haven't noticed, the financial statement this year is a little bit thicker than previous years, and that's due to the fact that the finance department has elected to compile a full, comprehensive annual financial report, a CAFR, for the current fiscal year to allow for greater transparency and for the council and also for the public. So let me start by saying that the opinion given on the report was unmodified, so that's the highest opinion that auditors give on financial statements. This was, colloquially known as a clean report. So then now I'll go over some financial highlights. On the government-wide governmental statement of net position for governmental activities, the assets exceeded the liabilities by approximately $2.4 million. That is a decrease of approximately $200,000 over the prior fiscal year when not taking prior period adjustments into account. This decrease in net position is primarily due to operating expenditures exceeding revenues, and in addition, pension expenditures related to the net pension liability also contributed to this decrease. But due to the nature of government-wide revenues and intergovernmental revenues not matching project expenditures, many times, funds are received ahead or after projects are actually completed, and because of the revenue recognition principle for governmental audits, it's hard to ascertain the financial health of the city from the statement of activities. So the government-wide statement doesn't really give an accurate representation of the city as a whole. For business type activities, so this includes water, wastewater, airport, and solid waste, which is the landfill. Assets exceeded liabilities by approximately $26 million. So this is a sizable increase of $1.3 million over the prior fiscal year. This increase includes rising sewer revenues, a continuing surplus in the water fund. However, a decent portion of the increase this year was due to a one-time revenue of approximately $580,000 from the sale of damaged timber around the watershed, and so that revenue shouldn't be counted on as part of the budgeting process as a continuing revenue stream. The successful collections of fees for landfill from the county contributed to an increase in revenue this year in the solid waste fund. However, there may be a future need for an updated engineer's estimate as based on my analysis, the expenditures are seeming to outpace the original engineer estimate that were given in 2015. So moving on to the general fund balance decreased by $476,000 this year to $2.5 million approximately, of which $2.4 million is unassigned. So costs have risen across the board in the general fund, and then capital projects in the current year. Both of these things contributed to the decrease in fund balance. So capital outlay this year consisted mainly of spending on a city hall bathroom remodel, so this is 1819, and then the police shooting range. General fund reserve percentage this year is approximately 46%. So that means basically the city can operate the general fund without additional funding on reserves alone for almost 6 months. This ratio, however, has decreased approximately 18% from the prior fiscal year. So in the prior fiscal year, the reserve percentage was significantly higher. And this necessitates caution going forward in the budgeting process. And in addition to that, due to the small monetary size of the reserve, even though the percentage seems adequate, any fiscal emergencies can quickly drain the reserve. The sewer fund net position increased $71,000 this year, primarily due to a sizable increase in service revenues because rates have increased. This is significant because, previous years operated at a deficit of approximately $340,000. The water fund net position increased by approximately $1.1 million. This increase is larger than the prior year, primarily due to the one-time sale of timber that we spoke of earlier. The solid waste fund still has a significant negative fund balance of $1.1 million, and that's because it's showing the liability for post-closure landfill maintenance without any receivable to offset, because it's something that the city is responsible for that hopefully it will be able to collect money from the county for in the future. So the only other fund that has a negative fund balance is the private purpose trust fund for the successor agency, and that's pretty much similar to most governmental agencies or cities in the state of California. When it comes to accounting pronouncements, GASB 68 and 71 was implemented in prior fiscal years. This is the net pension liability to show the pension on the financial statement, and luckily the net pension liability number has actually decreased $230,000 in the current fiscal year. So the net pension liability of the city as a whole is approximately now $8.9 million. $5.4 million comes from the miscellaneous plan for city employees other than public safety, and then $3.5 million comes from the safety plan. So the net pension liability only shows up in the government-wide statements, and then the statements for the enterprise funds, long-term liabilities. So if you remember, I said earlier that the net pension liability, the pension costs increase the governmental expenditures in the government-wide statement, and that's because so this year the net pension liability decreased, but in the previous 3 years it has decreased. So the way that the GASB has implemented showing the costs is that they're amortized over time. So when you have 3 bad years, you recognize the bad years over 3.8 fiscal years. So that way you don't have dramatic jumps in revenue and expenditures on your financials. So because of the bad years, this one good year is not going to reflect positively until you have 3 good years, at which time it'll start offsetting your operating expenditures in the enterprise fund and the government-wide statement. As far as going forward, the major implementation that's coming up in the future fiscal year, I believe in 2021 fiscal year ending, is GASB 87 for leases, which will affect the way that operating leases are reflected on the financials. And this also covers transactions with the the city is both the leaseor or the leasee. So this will be something that we'll look at going forward. It shouldn't have too much of an effect on the city. I'm not aware of too many operating leases besides copiers and vehicles. So GASB 88 was implemented in the current fiscal year relating to additional disclosure of long-term debt classified as direct placement or direct borrowings. This just adds to disclosure regarding that the city is not issued to the public but to a certain agency. So this actually it added to disclosure for loans and bonds that for monies that the city borrowed from other governmental agencies such as the Department of Water Resources and the State Water Reserve Control Board. So that's all I have for the current fiscal year. Are there any, this is a lot of information. The financial statements obviously is a lot of information. So feel free to take it home, digest it, and then if you have detailed questions, you can field them to June, who will then forward them to me if necessary. But for now, did anybody have any questions or comments on the audit?
Ben, this is Jerry Gonzalez. I just have a clarifying question. So an audit basically just says that we are following best practices when it comes to doing our books, but you don't actually give us a clean bill of health or that we're about ready to teeter into financial ruin. Is that correct?
Right. So, we issue an opinion on the accuracy of your financial statements. We're saying that your financial statements based on the opinion unit are not materially misstated.
Okay.
Basically, we're saying that the numbers are accurate, and to address your point, if there's a going concern, if we feel like there's an issue that's going to make the city insolvent in the near future, then we would present that as a going concern. And we don't see that. But what we do see is maybe continued, basically that the general fund balance has been decreasing over the years, and it is a cause for concern. So, it's been brought up with June, and I know, the city is doing what it can budget-wise, but no, we don't issue an opinion on the financial health of the city. We're just saying that the numbers are accurately stated, and then that the city is heading towards insolvency, where we don't see any signs of insolvency in the near future.
Okay. At this point, I'll open it up to anybody. Okay. Any questions?
Well, I have some questions, but I think I can just ask them of June at a separate time.
Anybody else? Anybody from the public?
I'll just say, I met with June today and got clarification on a few things that were just sort of red flags or things I didn't understand, and she was very helpful, and I guess you checked with Ben as well.
Yeah, you want me Madge has a question on the question I emailed you on what's in the community development. What is distinguished with the planning department? That question.
Okay, so the planning department covers the planning expenditure covers several departments in the general fund, namely code enforcement, planning, and building and safety. What categorized under community development is any cost related to housing, low and moderate income housing, like business rehab loans, and also just general spending on the community. So the two funds that add to that community development number is the H&S restitution and then the housing rehab fund. So funds 661 and 663, I believe. And so if you want additional details on what makes up those numbers from the general accounting details, I'm sure myself or Judy can provide that to you.
Well,
That's how the classifications work.
Well, I don't think the H&S restitution fund is part of community development.
I think this is a term that seems to be for financial reporting that doesn't coincide with the terms that we use for our budgeting purposes for community. The Community Development Department includes planning, and you're talking about some separate non-general fund, very small items but calling them community development sort of doesn't jive with the way we think of those words.
So, any other questions, or anybody from the public? You want to come up and ask you?
I have one question. First question, what year was the expenditure to repair the grandstands at the rodeo ground of over $360,000? And I find it interesting that this council would consider approving a budget that's already been reported to be a deficit budget.
Okay, we're not approving a budget, and actually the question would be relevant to this audit, and so we're not approving a budget, we're accepting the audit report, I believe is what we're doing.
But it sounds to me as if the audit report is in conflict with the budget, which says that we're going to be deficit. That's my...
No, the audit's goal is to say that our financial records are being kept in a clear and proper fashion.
Fantastic.
And so their unmodified report that our financials are done well, done correctly, done to standard, is what we're looking at. It's not a matter of how we're spending our money, it's how we're recording this spending.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarity.
Unless there's anybody else? All right.
I think Mark's question about that repair of the grandstands was covered by REMIT mostly, or REMIT?
That was covered by insurance payments, in my understanding. It was before my time, so I don't know.
Yeah,
it was quite a way.
and the audit doesn't tell us that we have to have a balanced budget. That's what we work hard to.
Yes.
It's not easy.
I just wanted to thank June for putting this together. I think she did a remarkable job, and I just really appreciate her work on this.
Yes, thank you, June.
So the recommended action...
No, this is the other one.
Oh, okay. So, Ben, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person to give the presentation, so hopefully next year, or for sure next year. We'll plan it better. I'll be there in person. I really apologize.
All right, we'll hold you to that. Thank you very much. All right. So, I guess at this point, we would receive and file the report. So, do we need a motion for that, or just?
Sure, why not?
Pick up.
Make a motion to receive and file the report. I'll second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
This one being the detailed about the financial statements, it just kind of like in line with our budget. There's attachment 2 on here, so I updated the estimate number at the beginning balance for 1920. That's on attachment 2. So we have I didn't change anything in the middle. It's on the budget book, page 25. I just changed the beginning balance, so our ending balance is changing.
Oh, okay.
So that's all it is. Yeah, just for your information.
Dolores was going to take a roll call vote since it does involve our money, so. Yes, guys.
Councilmember Connie.
Yes.
Rodriguez.
Yes.
Strong.
Yes.
Stransky. Mayor Gonzalez.
Yes. All right, thank you.
When is our mid-year budget adjustment going to happen?
It's supposed to be in the first meeting in March.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
June, we may not like the information you provide, but we like the way you provide it.
Yes, thank you.
Want to be more transparent, and everybody, understand what's going on, and,
And I know that we were kind of on other subjects, but again, thank you for presenting things and doing what you're doing, because we did have an award that your budget got us, and so I didn't want to take away from that, but I know we were kind of tired last meeting, and so thank you. All right, we are now on item 6, and it's just building inspection activity reports, and we just accept those. Item 7, the Willits.
You didn't do B on 3.
Oh, sorry about that. Thank you. I jumped around. Item 3B, consideration of city sustainability project, an agreement for billing audits of the city's utility bills by utility cost management, and 3, authorizing staff to circulate request for proposal regarding energy-reducing projects, later date to be determined.
Yes, Stephanie Gerbrandt Sierra, City Manager. This report was actually written by Suzanne Lautzes with some help by me. We worked on it together. And at this time, Suzanne Lautzes did resign, and so she is not here to give the report. However, I feel like I can, I will give it my best shot because I did work with her quite a bit on it. What the report does is, in response to our initial draft energy management plan, staff gave us further directions and regarding pursuing 3 main points of refinement within the plan. And we looked at that, and the first one was to find a city sustainability policy that we could get behind. And Suzanne researched that quite extensively. There are some cities that have a 30-page plan. Some cities have a very short plan. Most cities of our size don't have any plan at all. We have recommended one. It's attachment A, and it's a very basic plan, and it has guidelines for our city employees and our city policies that we would, be responsible. We would act in a responsible way to protect and preserve our natural environment, and that to state that those are priorities of the city, and that we are committed to procurement decisions with minimized negative impact, and we will look at sustainability issues most important to the community will be given preference. And these are general, but some of the examples of the practices include purchasing goods with recycled materials such as paper, retrofit lights when we can with LED, purchase energy efficient equipment when available and when replacing equipment, and vehicles shall be electric or energy efficient, low emission, and so on. And so this is a general policy that we'd like the council to adopt if they so choose. And it's a recommendation. The second recommendation is point 2, is to look at our current electric bills are quite extensive. They are, we get 60-page electric bills. We have electric meters everywhere. And so many cities have firms to review those bills because that sort of expertise is not normally kept on staff of any city. And so that task to look at these bills is contracted out to a firm that can take a look at our bills, and at no additional cost to the city, they will look and see if there's mistakes in the bill and that sort of thing, and they will take a percentage of those savings, and that is something that we can do. While we do not have a sustainability coordinator of any kind in the city, we're a very small staff city. The engineering department thinks that they could at least manage that contract at the very minimum. They think they can. We do have to write the contract, so we cannot implement this right away because, again, they're stretched pretty darn thin. But we would like to try to do that because we think it's in the best financial interest of the city to do that. Point 3 is there are companies, and we have been approached by many companies. They're called energy service companies. And they say, we will do free energy audits, we will do free energy audits. What they really want to do is look at our energy consumption and on the basis of what they think we can save by doing a major energy efficiency project such as a solar or methane project, with the savings that they could realize, see what they can leverage a large construction project, building something like a methane or a solar project, and by financing it with savings, that means the city would still pay the same amount, but whatever the savings would be would go towards actually the payment on a major construction project. We would not recommend doing this right away. We do not have the capacity to do a project like this. But secondly, we would like to first stabilize our energy bills by the use of point 2. Which is getting our energy bills as low as they possibly can be. And therefore, energy savings would be on the basis of the lower cost. our recommendation is that we not go forward with an RFP for a energy audit, and we do recommend doing an RFP because there are many companies that do this, and to not go forward for at least a year of stabilization of our electric bills. And that concludes my report.
Any questions of me?
In reading those letters, it sounded like they had good experiences, but nobody really talked about like for how long, for into perpetuity, like forever. Would you have to pay this company a portion of your savings?
3 years.
Yeah,
Just the
I
3
think the
years?
contract is either 2 or 3 years. I think Suzanne
What
negotiated
if-
2 years.
So, in those 2 or 3 years, would it just be projects that they had identified? What if, say, 10 years out, you took action on something that they recommended in that 2 to 3 year window? Are there types of things that would bind the city to that contract back at the origination?
So what they would do simply is look at our electric bills and catch mistakes. And so it's a bill by bill thing. My understanding is it's a month by month thing that they would look at, and that they would, for a 2-year period, take a portion of the savings, I believe 50% of the savings, but it's a month by month thing, just a correction of the bill, not for perpetuity, and we would go into a fairly short-term contract with them to do that.
Would this
Because
go
once they get,
backwards
so
or
once
forward?
it's forward, they would look at it each year. That's my understanding.
I think the contract says that if we don't take action on something that they recommended, and we do it later, that they recommended it, they retrieve some of that cost. But I think these are things that are not capital investments.
No, they're not
They're not projects. They're just reviewing the bills, and it's not just errors, but it's things like, are you taking advantage of the best rate structure that's available to you, like time of use structure and stuff. So, and it's pretty darn complicated when I have a stack like this, which is just December's bills, PG&E bills. It's about that thick, and it's really hard to even read it, let alone figure out what it means. And since these guys are experts at it, I don't think they're going to find, they might. I mean, but that's what they do. They'll feed it through their computer, and they know what to look for. If we're paying at a time of use rate and we identify by a flat rate or whatever, they will catch that kind of thing, and they get 50% of the benefit for, I thought it was 3 years, but maybe
I
two.
think
It's 3 years. But right now, we're paying this much. If they were able to take that much off, that's better than not taking advantage of it. And it's without any major project or capital improvement, which I would love to see come next. And I know that it would be nice to do this first, and that we hopefully will have enough ability to address that, because there's the sewage treatment plant alone is, I think, the one bill in December was, 1 month was 14,000 or 17,000. So every month we're paying an awful lot of money for electricity at the sewage treatment plant. So I'd like to see us get to number 3, but I think step 1 and 2 are good for now.
Anybody else?
I like the basic gist of the sustainability plan. I'm a little uncomfortable with the examples on attachment A. And the one that really stands out to me is in landscaping materials, including tree planting, strive to use native and low water species. The trees that we're recommending for Main Street are neither native nor particularly low water. So it's like, if we're going to put this in a city document, that this is what we're striving to, but what we're currently doing isn't that, we're kind of, sticking our foot in it. So I'm a little uncomfortable with the examples.
I can take that out.
How about something like in landscaping, we strive to be, using water in an effective way, using drip irrigation, landscape cloth, something like that, not using herbicides. But let's not talk about native species and water when we're not really doing it.
Well, and since you talked about the language, I would just like to leave the option, in a perfect world, I think it was Fremont or one of those down south that had a Tesla patrol car and it ran out of battery juice, so I'd like to not hamstring the police department with, you have to get an electric car. But, you know, eventually the technology will be there. And
What I could do is also just take out the examples.
I was going to
okay.
suggest you just remove
take
it.
out the examples.
there was a
Yeah.
language in there I
You've got-
thought I read that said it's prescriptive, not,
These are just, we just wanted to throw out some suggestions. We could easily just take them out.
okay.
So we can take them out if that's the law.
I would be more comfortable with that.
I like having some ideas there, but I think as long as staff is aware of
Sure.
the things that are feasible to do within this sustainability policy. At some point, once we have a really good baseline, I would also like to see us have a goal of cutting our carbon emissions by some percent per year if we are able to do that. But I know that, over the next over the next 10 years, we collectively, the whole United States in particular, needs to cut our carbon use by an enormous amount. And I think the city, as a responsible part of the United States, and all of us as citizens as well, should try to set goals and really work towards reducing our carbon footprint. And it's nice to have a sort of general goal that says, yes, we want to be environmentally responsible and we want to reduce our carbon emissions. But I think I'd like to see a baseline and try to really strive to meet a goal and push that way. Because if we don't do it, we're not setting the best example.
I would agree with that, but I think that when we go to do budgeting, you can't have a goal without that counter component, so we have to remember that that's a priority too.
I know.
Yeah.
That's why I'm not suggesting it right now, but I do think that I'd like to see us get there over the course. Especially, this audit might help us to start with. We need a baseline. We need to know where we're spending all of our energy dollars right now, what we can do to make that financially better for us, but also more environmentally responsible.
I guess we'll strive to be good. Anybody from the public would like to speak to this?
Good evening, again, Larry Halstead. Green energy has always been a big thing for me, and I like to hear these ideas about ways, because, it's like money, if you can save a penny, you've earned a penny, and same thing with energy. And so audit sounds like a good idea. I haven't had a chance to look at the proposal, but what I'd like to see is when we're talking about sustainability, we take a much bigger look. And what I'd like to see the council do is look at what some of the other mayors and some of the big cities are doing right now. Getting back to the PG&E issue, there's a lot of people that are anticipating that the company could be broken up. And San Francisco Mayor, Richmond, I believe Fresno, Bakersfield, some of the other ones are starting to form contingency plans on what their hunk of that grid would look like and how they could move forward and how they can take that and transform it into the new Green Deal and save the planet for, some people like my daughter over there. So I'd like to see, and by the way, I do have a degree in political science. I'd be happy to volunteer any kind of time working on that kind of a proposal because it's very near and dear to my heart. So thank you.
All right. Anybody else from the public? Then I'll bring it back up here. Do I have a motion?
Patch, do you want to make that motion?
Well, are we making a motion for all three of those items? 1, 2, and 3? Or are we just doing one at a time?
What is your pleasure?
Well, I'll just add my 2 cents that I think that 1 and 2 sound like no-brainers. I think you were eloquent in that 3 is, I think it's something we could put off for a little bit.
We have to.
Yeah.
I wish we did.
So maybe maybe your motion could be that we would re-examine 3 for feasibility in the future.
Okay. Well, I will move that we approve the city's sustainability policy minus the specific examples, and that we move to enter into an agreement on with this company to audit our our utility bills. And by the way, does it include gas as well as electric, is my understanding.
I'm not sure, actually.
I'm pretty sure it does.
Sorry.
It said that. And since PG&E provides both, they're going to look at it. So I make that motion.
And revisit number 3.
And that we will come back maybe within at least, or no more than a year to number 3. I would like to do that, to revisit it within at least a year.
All right. Do I have a second to her motion?
I'll support the motion.
Any further discussion? If not, I'll call for the vote.
I just want to state that I want to appreciate Madge's determination to get this on the agenda, and that the city staff's responsiveness to working. I know that there are other competing priorities that the city had, and that sometimes the council asks things that add a little extra on the plate. So I just want to say that thanks for you and for the rest of us.
And I would also like to say that while this in some ways may feel like precursory, like not big enough, I know, Madge, you often want more, and I share your sense of urgency and concern, but I do appreciate the city making an effort to codify this, that it is our goal that the city as a whole work to be sustainable and to be thinking in these terms when they're making decisions and in their various departments. So I appreciate the effort.
Just an example that came up recently in another meeting that I was in is that the county has this Climate Advisory Action Committee, and a lot of, I think, starting this year, new projects have to have solar, but the county jail doesn't have solar. It's a huge project. And we got a lot of sunshine in Ukiah, and I don't know why they didn't include solar while they were at it. It wouldn't have cost that much. It probably would have saved them money. Just an example of, us as decision makers looking at every opportunity we can to do that.
All right.
And vote.
Councilmember Connie?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Strong?
Yes.
Stransky? Yes. Mayor Gonzalez?
Yes, and again, thanks, Madge. All right, sorry I tried to jump ahead of this. All right, so, again, we had nothing for item 6, sorry. We do have it, but it's submitted for information. And commissions, agencies, and authorities. The Willits City Council meets as the Willits Planning Commission and Willits successor, and we had nothing
Get your
there.
contact.
And so, and city manager reports and recommendations.
I have just a few announcements. I was asked to announce that we are having a public workshop on the groundwater management plan. This workshop will be held on February 20th from 5:30 to 7:30 at City Hall. We're trying to get the word out on that. The workshop will offer the public an opportunity to provide input on groundwater management plan components and help guide the plan development process. We would like as many people as possible to go to that.
What was that date again?
The February 20th from 5:30 to 7:30 here at City Hall. They also, engineering gave me a list of things. Jeremy Ronco, who's in our engineering department, wanted to let folks know that PG&E has asked for 2 major encroachment permits to be processed because they plan to do some significant changes in the gas lines. And so he is going to be, unfortunately, tied up working on those encroachment permits. And they're quite large. They involve a railroad avenue. The railroad project around Railroad Avenue will consist of deactivating 8,300 linear feet of gas main, installing 8,300 linear feet of new 2-inch and 4-inch gas main on a railroad, East San Francisco, Central Monroe, Alameda, East Barbara, and South Streets. There will also be some tie-ins on Main Street. So we're going to be a site of some major construction for PG&E.
Can you rename those streets, please?
Yes, I can. Railroad, East San Francisco, Central Monroe, Alameda, East Barbara, and South Streets. with tie-ins to Main Street. There is also the Hazel project, and now these are still subject to modification. We heard today that there may be some modification of the second project, and that will be nearly the same size at 6,000 linear feet, extending into the county. And the affected city streets proposed but not final are Hazel, Locust, Magnolia, Poplar, and Walnut, with tie-ins extending to Main Street. And there's going to be, traffic control is very tricky due to its proximity to the school. That's why our engineering department is involved with these encroachment permits, because they have to make sure that the traffic flows. And it's a big project for Jeremy. They do pay for their time, for our time, however.
And when are these projects expected to happen?
That is a good question. The Hazel project is expected to start in May. The railroad project in April. I think that that's ambitious.
And this is going to involve like tearing up the streets pretty completely?
Well, we'll see. I'm hoping that they can do underneath boring so that it minimizes tearing up of the street.
Is that going to be in your newsletter so that we could get a little bit more of that information out to the public? So it's hard to write that fast.
Yeah, this is the first I've heard of it, and I want engineering to put it out there to the public so they're really well aware. So I asked him to write something for me, because when I heard about it, it was like, oh my goodness, write me up something.
Can you send something to us in written format so that we can get the right information out?
And I could actually forward you his email to me. From what I heard today, they may be already modifying it. Jeremy is off this week because it's his birthday today. He's turning 40. Or else he would have been here to talk about it. But he will certainly give us more information when he's back.
And it should be more final then.
And then we'll get more details.
And we don't have...
This is like the first I've heard of it, so I just want to give you the information as soon as possible.
Can I ask you a quick question? Sure. So when you mentioned this earlier today during the Caltrans meeting, there was concern that potentially this would impact some of the streets we had just paved, and right now it's looking like that's not going to be the situation. But somebody in that meeting mentioned that Caltrans has a rule that they don't allow PG&E to come in and cut on newly planted streets. So if the street has just been paved, they have a 5-year moratorium on any cutting in. And I wondered if that's something that we as a council should consider, creating some kind of an ordinance or resolution or something to protect us in the future, that when we do PPP or some new road project, PG&E can't come in and say, oh, by the way, we're going to rip that all up this year and put in new gas lines. Can we do that?
Yeah.
Can we do that?
That's something to look into. That sounds like a good plan. I'm wondering though about emergency needs to do it, notwithstanding our...
Well, clearly emergencies would be, a separate issue, but...
Right, but there might be some parameters to work with. I'll look into that.
Okay.
Because we coordinate.
Working on that.
Oh,
Yes.
Already thought of that.
Go, Dusty.
It's on the list.
Because we coordinate with them when we go do our streets, and I would hope that they'd be like, oh yeah, we're gonna do X, then,
Right.
Thank you, Greta. And thank you, Dustin.
And does the council see any of these encroachment permits? Is that just a staff level
No,
decision?
it's a staff level.
Staff level.
It's routine business for us. Also, we went to the REMIF annual, there's an annual meeting for REMIF to talk about what's coming up. Looks like insurance rates are going up another 30%. And we talked about the REMIF is considering a merger with Parsac, which is another insurance pool. It's a much larger insurance pool and would give us some, REMIF is very small, and it makes me I think it makes all the members a little nervous. Pools are good because they're pools. We share risk, and having a small pool is scary. So entering an agreement with Parsac is happily anticipated. So that's what they're talking about. The first merge will be in our workers' comp programs. It will probably come next year, I believe.
Would we be full voting members once we join?
Yes.
So that
We would
we
still
can
be-
control our costs?
We would still be voting members, but our vote would be diluted because it would be a much bigger pool.
But I know that when REMIF, I noticed that was an issue with REMIF before, that some of the agencies didn't have the same voting rights, and so...
No, we would insist on one city, one vote. And they're all down with that. Parsac is one city, one vote as well.
So
Couple of pieces of good news. PG&E was here today, looking at our community resource center as a site for a community resource center during the next PSPS season. They were delighted with our configuration. They were busily measuring our ADA bathroom and says it's wonderful, and because of our ADA bathroom, we will likely qualify to be a community resource center. And what that may include is actually them putting in a generator at their cost for City Hall that would automatically turn on if the power went off. So that's awesome. But she was delighted with our setup, and so that was great. And it's not a done deal, but we passed our first inspection. Second, I've been trying desperately, or not desperately, I've been trying to find an interim police chief, because our police chief is retiring, and we're going to miss him a great deal. But I've been Bob Peralt, who was our who was our interim city manager before I got here, and I think he was beloved by all, and a very experienced and wonderful city manager. He actually called me and said he had the perfect guy, and worked with him in Greenfield for 8 months. His name is Gregory Allen. He made it final this Monday morning to said yes, he's excited to come on board. And he has over 4 years of experience. He's retired out of LAPD and then has taken some interim gigs, and one of them was in Greenfield with Bob Peralt for 8 months. And he's excited. He came to Willits. He thought it was a beautiful place, and he's very excited.
So we have to do a resolution at the next meeting?
So I'll bring his contract to you at the next meeting.
Does he have, like many interims do, does he have a limitation on?
He does not.
How many months he can?
Well, see, what's so great about this particular interim is the fact that he retired out of LAPD, which has a completely separate retirement system. So he has no limitation on how long he can stay.
That's good.
So if we charm him, maybe he'll stay. And then also, that's, when we're recruiting for a new police chief, that's really what we're going to be shooting for is, perhaps retired officers who already have a retirement, because our pay is very low. If you've already got a salary coming in, this is just sort of gravy, and they're here because they want to be here. And it's not all about salary, and that's what it is with Gregory. He really loved it here. So anyway, so that's my second piece of good news, and then that's all I have to say.
Okay. So item 9A, consideration of granting incentive benefits for members of the Willits Police Association in the amount of $2,000 in February 2020 and $1,500 in August 2020. And we have our Human Resources Director here to speak to this, and I think the next couple items.
Good evening, Mayor Gonzalez and council members. In recognition and appreciation of the members of our Willits Police Officers Association and their members, it's recommended to grant a two-part incentive pay to recognize city dedication. This would apply to any member who has been with the department for at least 6 months. The first payment of $2,000 would be given in February 2020. Another payment of $1,500 would be given in August of 2020 for those who have been with the department for 6 months, and this payment is not perishable. This payment would not allow any member who is under disciplinary action or who is on leave while on disciplinary action is investigated or pending. Any member currently eligible to receive the payment for this reason would be able to receive the full amount of the incentive pay if, after the investigation and/or disciplinary process has concluded, the result is not sustained, unfounded, or exonerated. So the purpose of the incentive pay is to recognize the hard work and dedication of our POA members who work long hours under difficult conditions for the people of the city of Willits. Our police officers are currently working maybe 7 to 10 days in a row, 12-hour shifts or longer. We are lucky to have 2 of our distinguished dispatchers here with us tonight, and one of them who stepped in and worked 20 hours in a 24-hour period due to the shortage of our staff. And they do this without hesitation. The amount of money will be taken from the HS Restitution Program funds, which is also known as the DA Restitution Fund. This fund has no restrictions as to what it can be used for, and the fund, we don't need to know the number. At this time, 9 members are eligible for the first payment, and we are anticipating another 9 for the second payment. The total amount is $3,100,500. There is sufficient money in this fund to pay for the amount of the incentive pay. So we're asking that you approve the incentive pay and let them know that we do appreciate their hard work and dedication.
Are there any questions? All right, Treasurer.
No.
Would anybody from the public like to speak? None.
I did have one question. You said that the total amount that expected, was that with the...
Yeah, the total amount is expected is $3,100,500.
And I did want to say that we did not budget this amount, but in the mid-year, we will be.
$31,500.
That's what I was going to say. That didn't add up. Yeah.
Sorry, it's late.
Yeah, okay, that's what I wanted to make sure. So that's the, all of those who are eligible for it.
Correct.
For the 2 different payments added up. Okay, thank you.
All right, so it's back up here. Do I have a motion to approve staff
Aren't we
recommendation?
talking about $3,500 total incentive?
Yes.
And then there's 9 people you said who are eligible?
9 people now, and we anticipate another 9 for the second payment.
In addition to...
So they'll get $2,000 up front and $1,500 in August.
3,500 times 9 is 28,000.
I don't know, that's what she gave me.
We,
Well, and to be honest, I know you have to be here for 6 months.
let me do a quick math thing again.
So it would be 18
We had 2 people who did the addition. One of them was not June. I'm going to say...
I'd like to point out the police chief doesn't get this.
So we have $3,500 times...
That's 31.
18.
31, 50, 31, right.
Oh, times 9.
It takes a
So
breach.
in August, if the first 9 are still with us, then that would be 18.
Well, actually, the first 9 will not be with us, but we do anticipate that by then we have 2 people that are not eligible for the first incentive pay because they don't have 6 months of service. They will get it on the back end. And we do have, yeah.
Oh, okay, so the total, okay.
And I'll make a motion to approve.
Do I have a second? Seconded by Greta. All right.
I got
further?
31,500.
We're good.
Any further discussion? All right, call for the vote.
I'm sorry, who made the motion?
Sabrina, seconded by Greta.
Councilmember Connie?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes, and I would agree with Karen that they are hardworking and they are appreciated.
Strong?
Yes.
Stransky?
Yes.
Mayor Gonzalez?
Yes. All right, now, item 9B.
This is to approve a budget revision to include the police lieutenant, effective tomorrow, February 13th, and eliminate one of the police officer 3s, that's the position that the lieutenant is currently filling, and the police corporal classification from the budget. So we're seeking a budget revision. The fundamental reason for the existence of this classification is to organize and manage the operational activities and personnel of the police department and to provide reasonable technical and administrative staff assistance to the chief of police. The lieutenant exercises considerable independent judgment in directing and managing the daily operations of police services provided by the police department. The position provides supervision and meets with staff to identify and resolve problems, monitors workflow, etc. This person will also personally conduct highly complex or sensitive investigations. Due to the shortage of staff, the lieutenant, although is an exempt position, because he is a first responder and will have to take patrol shifts. If he was to work patrol shifts in overtime, he would be paid overtime. We do have an internal candidate that we would like to fill the position with, so no new positions are going to be authorized. You can see that the financial impact is, right now, the corporal position is budgeted at 69J, step 5. for the first 6 months of the budget and 6 for the second. The current internal candidate is budgeted at Officer 3 at pay grade 71A, step 6. The proposed budget will be based on internal candidates filling this position. There is a breakdown of the salary savings. I got to be honest, the calculation is not including the budget to actual because of the overtime that they're having to work. So I don't know if we'll actually see a salary savings because they're out on the streets filling the officers' vacancies. Any questions?
I have a question. Most places that do the overtime for exempt folks do it as kind of an agreement or a short-term thing, and then it reverts back, because in essence, you're writing a blank check for ever and ever. It depends on how you do it.
Well, actually, I conducted a dialogue with our legal from LCW, and he assured me that because he is a first responder, the laws allow him to receive overtime if he's performing duties as an officer in the streets. So there's no limitation.
I mean, as chief, I responded to calls, and...
Oh, yeah, I understand.
And so, I mean, I guess it's just a question of definition, whereas when I was captain, I had an agreement with the then city manager for something similar to this, and I got paid for overtime sort of things, but meetings and those sort of things, and eventually, when staff got up to a certain point,
Correct.
I wasn't... but on occasion, I would go out and work Halloween or something, and so there's kind of a different...
Right. There really has to be a reason for him to be out in the streets, because he's got a lot of other work. He's going to be the go-between between the sergeants and the chief, and he's going to be the administrator.
I guess that's my only concern, is how we write it up. I'm for it, I just want to make sure that it doesn't become a blank check down the road.
No.
Because,
and hopefully we do have 4 people that are currently in background, and we hope to get them on the streets. We have another one that we are trying to entice. I won't say where. We're trying to bring people over. So we're hoping that soon we will have a full staff, but we have to. Unfortunately, right now he's going to have to be out in the streets.
Does anybody else have any questions? Anybody from the public like to speak? Okay. Do I have a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve a budget amendment, revision to include the police lieutenant effective February 13th and eliminate the police officer 3.
One of the police officers.
One of the police officers and the police force as written.
I second the motion.
All right, motion is second. Any further discussion? If not, I'll call for the vote.
Councilmember Connie?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Strong?
Yes.
Yes.
Mayor Gonzalez?
Yes. All right. Item C.
This is to approve a budget revision to include a police sergeant with an advanced post certificate title in accordance with the Willits Police Officer Association Memorandum of Understanding to be effective tomorrow, 2020. We are seeking this to, in accordance with the MOU, so the classification is distinguished from a police sergeant who has an intermediate certificate, and this individual will have possessed an advanced certificate. It's not an increase in headcount. The police sergeant shall receive, according to the MOU, the police sergeants will receive the 5% above the regular pay, so that's 2 pay scales above. And we do, again, want to fill it with an internal candidate, and that person will be at step 4 with their annual salary. The fiscal impact is that the sergeant position is currently at pay grade 77D, and we are proposing that they go to 79D, both at step 4. The net increase to the general fund budget is, without considering CalPERS unfunded pension liability for upgrading the position, is $34,314, and you'll see the details below. Any questions?
The only thing I'll add is, as we probably get more people that may qualify with the advanced, et cetera, that we budget this in the future so that we don't have to come back and revisit it. It just becomes a matter of MOU.
Right. We had intended to do that, but at the time...
I get, yeah. I just want to make sure that as we go into budget, if anybody else is going to fall into this, that we just make sure to budget them.
Right.
So, Any further discussion or questions up here? Anybody from the public? Do I have a motion?
I will move approval of that line C as written.
Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
All right, no further discussion?
Well, I just want to say that, we're all very mindful of our general fund situation, and we are running a deficit, and this is slightly increasing that deficit, and we know that. But having a local police force is absolutely essential to the health and welfare of our city. And right now, we're spending an awful lot of money bringing officers from other communities at higher pay scales and paying them overtime to fill in for positions that we aren't able to fill, and the existing officers are overworked, and we have to be able to pay a reasonable amount. We're not going to be able to compete with all the other jurisdictions. We have other benefits that we offer, and including, it's being a wonderful place to live, but we can't not pay our officers what they should. We would like to pay them even more, and we need to raise the revenue to do that. So we just have to do this.
And I also want to recognize our support staff over there, too. So, all right, call for the vote.
Councilmember Connie?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Strong?
Yes.
Stransky?
Yes.
Mayor Gonzalez?
Yep, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, item 10, City Council Committee, Boards, Agency Reports. Start over there with Greta.
We had a Caltrans meeting today. Larry and I were both there, basically going over the details of the relinquishment. Relinquishment has been delayed. It will not be happening in March. It will be happening at the end of May, no, mid-May. Basically everyone's just crossing their T's and dotting their I's, making sure that all the proper details are finalized. We're still waiting for some documentation from Caltrans before the city accepts anything. Ultimately, it will come before the council for us to pass a resolution saying that we accept the relinquishment. There were some questions about the timing of the traffic signal. There were some questions about a lot. It's basic. I felt like it was a good meeting today. Rod Wilburn was here from our contract engineer, and if Larry has something to add, I'm sure he will.
The thing that Greta and I looked after the meeting I think was most interesting to me was the delay of 3 seconds when the green light is on, then it goes to red, and then when it comes back to green, there's a 3-second delay for the traffic for the pedestrians to go across the crosswalk. So it gives you a little head start and gets you out into people where people can see it. And we practiced it on the one on Commercial and 101.
So those two gentlemen were actually part of the signal operation department, and they were great. They were very friendly, they were helpful, they answered our questions, and they did confirm that the pedestrian delay was only happening on one leg or one trip around the intersection. It wasn't tied all together. So that's why some of our residents were seeing the delay when they were heading east on Main Street, crossing, or on Commercial crossing Main Street, but they weren't seeing it when they were leaving Brick House and crossing over towards the Van Hotel. Hopefully now that should be fixed, so there should be a pedestrian delay on all legs of the intersection. We will have 2 weeks until the next Caltrans meeting to make sure that's happening, and if it's not, they tell us that they have another trick they can try to make sure that that's working the way it's supposed to.
Does it also apply to the other signal intersections in town?
No, just that one. And we should remind people, you have to press the button to get the delay or to get any kind of a pedestrian signal. If you don't press that, it'll just give you a red hand, and you're not supposed to cross because you could get a ticket for jaywalking. So unless the hand is blinking, you can't go. That's what they told us. Caltrans told us that it's against the vehicle code to cross in an intersection if it's not.
Oh, no, it's against the law, you're right.
It's just not jaywalking.
Oh, okay. Akin to. Can we say that?
I will agree to that.
Okay.
Press that button and make that light turn quicker. I just want to show appreciation. I went out with an officer from the Willits Police Department, had the opportunity to spend a couple hours, and then I also went and did a tour at the wastewater and the water plant. I thought it's 2020, it's a new year. I've been on the council for a couple years. It would be nice to touch bases with each department. We make lots of decisions up here that impact each of the departments and ultimately impact the community. And so just want to show some appreciation for the time they took to show me around.
You're on, Mitch.
So tomorrow is a meeting of the Economic Development and Financing Corporation, and my understanding is that they have agreed on an accepted interim general manager of EDFC, who is Sheila Rogers. Do I have that right? She founded West Company. She led West Company for, I think, more than a decade. Lots and lots of experience in the issues that EDFC is working on, lots of connections with the community. So we're looking forward to having her on board as our new general manager. And meanwhile, there are funds available if any businesses out there want to seek funding for expanding or starting a business. Contact EDFC. Actually, first contact a bank, because the rules are you have to be turned down by a bank before we can provide you funds, but that often happens. Startup businesses have trouble getting loans from banks, so that's one of the things EDFC is for. Also, the Solid Waste Management Authority, sort of popularly known as Mendo Recycle, will be meeting, I think it's a week from tomorrow, and it'll be 10 o'clock here in this room. And there's always a lot of interesting things happening with our waste stream and state legislation that makes it really challenging. So those are the two main committees.
Larry? Yes, MCOG. The first thing on MCOG was the Citizens Committee to Public Information or Public Communication, and there was a group of people there that were not protesting, but asking why that the big redwood trees at the end of Camp 19 were cut down, and there's approximately, from what they said, they cut 100 trees at the end. So if you're going towards Fort Bragg from Willits, and as you get through Camp 19 and start to make the turn, there's 100 trees that are out of that, redwood trees that are out of that area that they've cut to widen the road. That was an hour and a half worth of listening to that one. There's a lot of things happening. Okay, the next thing, on MCOG, we had unmet transit needs, and I asked to have the 7 Adventist Health Howard Memorial Hospital, and they're in a real bind to move patients from the hospital to the hospital and then back, and not as a group but as individuals, and they're having a lot of trouble getting the patients from one place to the other. And so I asked to have it put on the unfunded mandates, and so we're going to look at that and see if there's something that we can do about it. The next thing was Blosser Lane, and I don't know if there was anybody on the council that went to the meeting from Blosser Lane School to the intersection of Highway 20, and we were told that they're going to do something because it's an unsafe place. And so the two items that were put up on at that particular time was to paint the intersection with a lot of different colors, so that when people were coming from Fort Bragg into town, into Willits, that they would recognize that it was an intersection, because they were just driving, 80 miles an hour, and it seemed like pulling a big trailer and all this kind of stuff. So anyhow, we went out there and checked it. So we were told by Caltrans, this has been 7 months ago, that this is, and I'll pass this down, that this was one thing that they wanted to do is to make the different colors. The other one is the roundabout, so you can look on the other side of it.
So they're still open to a roundabout, Larry?
No, they're still talking about it. So what they're gonna give us is they're gonna give us 6 lights that flash and sign at Highway 20, and this is what it's gonna look like.
So to understand you correctly, Larry, they talked about the roundabout, but they decided against it.
It was
and
too,
the
it was
6
too much
lights.
money and they
Okay.
hadn't planned it yet. So they did with the painting was the thing that they were going to do to make it real noticeable to people that are coming from Fort Bragg into Willits area. And the thing that was interesting is that the sign that said how fast you're going is on the east side of Highway of Blosser Lane, not on the other side where as you're coming into town, it blinks and says, you know, you're going 70 miles an hour. It is all the way past Blosser Lane. So anyhow, but that's,
Are they going to move that?
they're going to put up the flashing sign, that's it.
But west of the intersection?
Yeah, it shows you where they're going to be. Some of them are going to be 600 yards up the street. But the thing about it is, as you're coming, you're making a curve, and then the hill, it goes down a hill. So anyhow, that's their solution to it, and I just thought everybody ought to know what the solution is to Highway 20.
Did they tell you a date that this might be a reality?
I just sent the council an email that has the latest information from Caltrans.
It says summer, fall 2020 on this piece of paper, is that?
I can update it when it's community development time, maybe.
Did we ask for any of these?
Anyhow, that's it for me.
Yeah, we didn't do department.
What?
We didn't ask for the other.
Oh, department head, okay. Let's finish up here and then we'll go back to it, thank you. You went to Measure B the other day, I think, right?
Oh, yes, I did. And it was, some of the same people that talked here talked at Measure B, and they still haven't told us how much money that the whole thing is going to cost. They haven't told us that they were going to pay for anything other than just remodeling the building. Nobody has any idea how much it's going to cost to employ the people that are going to run Measure B. And so there's just a lot of questions out there.
And their director just quit right after.
The director just quit. She was there a month and a half. And so they have a lot of money, but it's just not happening. And I just think that we, as taxpayers, need to know how much money it's going to cost us. I mean, I have no idea how much it's going to cost, especially to put the people in their jobs, how much money that's going to be. And this is supposed to go for 10 years, and then they're going to have another initiative or whatever. But that's one thing that nobody has been able to come up with is the amount of money. And I know Tom Allman mentioned today that they had quite a bit of money, but that's going to go fast. And they're not going to spend any more money than they have to. But nobody knows how much that's going to be. And that's pretty much it on Measure B.
I normally attend with Larry, but I was tied up on something else, and he gladly covered it for us. So, and again, our purpose is just to go there and just make sure we get the straight information coming out of there. So, hey, I just have 2 things on LAFCO, and then I apologize, I didn't do the department recommendations, so we'll come back to you guys in a second. LAFCO, we reviewed our executive officer and went over, basically that took over doing some budgetary things, and we're basically looking at, I guess next meeting we're going to have it's called the Wager Detachment. There's some folks that want to secede from the Coast Hospital District down there in Ukiah, And I've never heard of such a thing, but apparently they feel they can be better served by the Inland Valley, and so that's going to be the big item, the next meeting down there for LAFCO. And Ukiah, it looks like they're sending their city attorney to LAFCO regarding, I'm assuming it's because they're looking at some annexation stuff, so that's, he's been attending regularly, and so, and then we're trying to meet, I'm on the committee with LAFCO for, I guess it's a policy committee regarding setting policy regarding use of our staff's time, so I guess they're going to try and do the meeting up here in Willits, but it's like an ad hoc sort of thing. And then I did go to Sacramento and just give you the highlights for the League of Cities Policy Committee that I sit on, and I'm on the Public Safety Committee, and they also gave us a brief overview of the governor's budget. They talked a little bit about homelessness. One of the things they did tell us is the governor had opened up all state facilities if they can be used for housing the homeless. And most of the time they're looking at things like the fairgrounds, those sort of things. But it sounds like the governor issued an executive order allowing the use of underpasses and freeway underpasses and overpasses to, I guess, to allow homeless to be there. So this is kind of a moving target out there. I don't think we quite have anything in town like that per se, except maybe, I guess, the two spots where it crosses, but I don't see it as big a deal for us as it would be some communities down in the Bay Area where, you know, that freeway creates this kind of these giant caves that you can be in, and so there was a lot of upset people there from other cities in the urban areas that look like they're going to be impacted by that. So that's one thing. And they also did a presentation there from the grocers. There's a bill to modify one of the, trying to think of the name of the proposition, but basically where they went from petty theft, went from being $400 before to now $950, and they talked about that there are folks that basically shop your stores, and their intent is not to get to the $950, but basically rip you off up until then, and so they're talking about changing that, and also some of the penalties that are out there. And one of the things that also has changed, and I think each of the police departments was invited with the Department of Justice to, they've changed the sex registrant rules now. So a lot of folks that were sex registrants before, they get to come off. So that's coming to a community near you, so to speak, that they're going to make it easier for certain levels of offenders to get off of having to register. Used to be it was a lifetime registration, and that's changed, so they discussed that. So at this point, I'm going to community development. Do you have anything?
Knew about. Hi, Mayor. Hi, council members. Dusty Dooley, happy to be your community development director. Just a couple things. Councilmember Stransky mentioned some improvements that Caltrans has planned for the Blosser Coast Highway 20 intersection. Both Larry and I and others attended a meeting that Caltrans held at the Blosser School to talk about different improvement ideas at that intersection for pedestrian safety and to try to slow traffic down. The roundabout was certainly a preferred concept, but due to the price, there wasn't existing funding in Caltrans' budget nor our own to pay for such an improvement. They recently sent us some preliminary plans to look at that includes the feedback signs, the yellow flashing beacons, some additional intersection lighting, some striping that'll reduce the length of the crosswalk at the intersection. So certainly improvements that are going in the right direction. What we did ask for, a request at that meeting, was that should these improvements prove to not be adequate enough, that we continue to show the roundabout as a potential alternative that may go further towards accomplishing our goal of having adequate pedestrian safety across there. And, I just want to quickly mention that, the safety issues at that intersection have been brought up at numerous meetings, have been included in all related planning documents. And so if the community hadn't attended those meetings and continuously identified that as the biggest issue related to public safety and our top priority, I don't think we would have these plans in front of us today. So just as we are going through these planning exercises, it actually is important to show up to your meeting, have your voice be heard, whether it's something as simple as filling out a survey. I want to thank MCOG staff because a lot of times they're the ones funding these planning meetings and funding these planning documents. So I appreciate the community and their efforts in identifying what we all know is a safety issue, and I'm glad to say it looks like we are going to get some improvements there. Just sent you the council an email with the update I got from Caltrans. They're going to the CTC, expected to go to CTC in May to authorize the funding for this project. And they don't have a timeline for construction yet, but the goal is to try to get the improvements done before school goes back into the session in late August. So
just so you know, it's been 20 years since I dealt with it as chief, and that light, the speed thing, we brought it up. I want to say you were already on, maybe it might have been an Elm thing when we mentioned, can it be on the other side? And they fought us because they said the curvature of the road, and so I'm glad it's going to before the intersection.
Yeah, it happened overnight after 20 years.
I have a question for you. You said that you're working on trying to keep the roundabout idea alive in the event that these additions aren't sufficient to address the community's safety concerns. How will we measure that? How will they know if these efforts aren't sufficient?
Community will tell them.
Okay.
When we start updating these planning documents. Yeah.
So some of that's done by public comment, some of it's done by accident data. I don't think it used to just be accident data, and they would say nobody died, so you don't get it. Right. And I think that thinking has kind of gone away. But obviously, it helps if you have accident data that supports it.
Thank you, Mayor. The other thing I wanted to update the council was some activity happening in the Safeway parking lot. I've had folks ask me what's going on there. What's going on there is that Safeway has partnered up with Electrify America to install 4 EV charging stations within the Safeway parking lot. Some people, when I tell them that, are very excited to hear that. Others to have a different response. In order to accommodate the 4 EV charging stations, of which one will be ADA compatible, American with Disabilities Act, they had to convert 11 existing parking spaces within Safeway. 5 existing parking spaces are being converted to support the 4 actual EV charging station dispensers, and the other 6 are being converted to support their equipment pad where all the electrical equipment is. With the EV charging station, they did go through a planning approval process. That's our site plan review process, whereby staff ensured that the project was consistent with city code. It's not an opportunity to deny a project, simply to confirm that it is consistent with applicable city code and therefore can move forward to the building permit stage. So, for instance, we looked at things like making sure the electrical was underground and making sure that they understood the signage and ADA requirements, electrical code. We looked at the required parking for all the businesses in Safeway per our off-street parking standards and confirmed that there was additional parking spaces beyond what our code requires, so that they weren't inconsistent with our parking standards even after converting the 11 spaces. Safeway is not under a use permit, so there's no condition that they provide extra parking beyond what's required by code, even though we know that there's certainly is times when all the parking spaces can be used, or at least come pretty close. We did try to steer the project sort of to the northeast corner of Safeway to try to get it away from sort of the more prime parking spaces. However, I'll have to go back to the email, but they had justified reasons as to why they couldn't locate there, probably mainly cost. Again, there was no authority for me to, I can only suggest that. Further, there's actually state law, and it's AB 1236, and what it says is, and our city attorney, I don't know, I didn't give them this to look at it, but just to read the language, it says that a city cannot deny a permit for EV charging stations unless the city makes specified written findings based upon substantial evidence in the record that the proposed installation would have a specific adverse impact upon the public health or safety. So just not wanting them apparently is not a good enough reason to deny them. But anyways.
So I hate to ask this because you need another project or another suggestion of a project, like something bad.
I was so looking for something to do.
I will tell you that there are many people in the community who had that other response to EV charging stations going into Safeway parking lot and who feel that there is not sufficient parking there at all ever. Is it time to consider at some point down the road when you don't have 9 million projects on your plate, re-looking at city code or ordinances or whatever it is that says if you're going to have this business, you have to have X amount of parking? I mean, it's obviously not something that we prioritize now, but...
At some point, like we keep mentioning, our general plan, our zoning code has not gone through a comprehensive update in a long time. And so, when we identify funding and we're able to prioritize staff time, I think, right now it's just, we're just adding to the list, and making notes. And it's, we've identified several things that need attention, whether it's signage, parking, the actual zoning map itself, et cetera. If projects that are subject to discretionary permits, like use permits, we can make a finding that additional parking beyond their code is required. So when we do get those discretionary permits in front of us, we do have the authority to make sure that nexus proportionality come into play, but you can make findings that additional parking is required. I think in Safeway situation, that would be an example of when you might, look to make that call. But that's not the situation this time. We just go out based on the use and the square footage of the building. Yeah. That's all I had to share with you, unless you had further questions.
David, do you have anything?
No, I honestly personally like solar and electric cars. People say we don't have any electric cars, so I view, selling more charging stations throughout our communities will maybe change that dynamic, and maybe more people in our community will purchase an electric car because they can charge it. They're just like gas stations. We have a million gas stations. We don't have millions of charging stations, so it's an infrastructure. Overall, I think.
So that actually brings up another interesting point. One of the things that we have heard you say continuously, Stephanie, is that the city relies on sales tax and particularly on gasoline sales. If we're having more electric vehicles charging stations put in and they're on private property like Safeway, the city isn't recognizing any sales tax from that. Is it legal? Is it something we can do? Is it worth looking into? Can the city somehow tax that or assess a fee on that so that we are seeing some revenue for these new gas stations?
Levy, look into that.
And a question, are those, what do you call it, type 3 or?
There's
the one at Safeway? Because the ones that at the city parking lot over there are type 2 that are slow.
I believe there's 275 kW chargers and 2 350, so they're more equivalent to a faster charge. I couldn't tell you the exact time, but there's 2 higher charge capacities, and then they do have the ability in the plans. It's not in there, but there is actually the ability for them to add 2 more dispensers to that location should it prove.
Debbie, are they free for people?
No, they're not, and it's just like ours in the city are not free, and I haven't used them, I don't have an electric car, so I don't know what the cost is. We should have asked Michelle, she uses them. But there is an app, you pay for the power, so you do, and there's multiple different versions of it, but there's most of them use it on their phone, they can use it on their credit card, but they do pay for it. And I do not know the dynamics of how that gets taxed or anything like that,
Yeah,
but
it's an
people do
interesting
pay for it.
Well, and I know this, speaking to what Greta was saying, this was brought up when the whole gas tax came up, that as more electric vehicles come on, there's less gas tax coming in for communities, and therefore, that was the justification for that. So, thank you, Davey.
We'll definitely look into the.
Question.
Oh,
Have you had any luck in people filling out the code enforcement complaint on the one you posted on the?
Yeah, we've had a few come in. Yeah, and it is nice when they come in, we take it. Some people just want to complain, and when you ask them to fill it out, it kind of like, oh, well, it's not that big of a deal. So it is helpful. It does, it helps kind of prioritize seriousness when they're written in paper and not just over the phone. Sometimes it's hard to take over the phone. People can't convey the problem concisely, or they don't want to give you information that you really need to go take care of the problem. So when you put it down in the form, it's definitely better. So I appreciate sharing that with the community. Anything else? All right, thank you.
Scott Warnock, Chief of Police. I want to correct something that the mayor said. I know he didn't mean anything negative by it, but we don't have support staff at the police department. You mentioned earlier you want to thank the support staff. If you meant dispatchers, they're the heart of the police department. So I wanted to point that out to you. Also, this is my last meeting. And I'm going to Stanford that day. So I want to thank you all. It's been a pleasure actually working with you all. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure having you.
Yeah. We'll see you at that first meeting in March.
Yeah, no.
all right. Did you have anything else? Okay. All right.
And Jim didn't have anything.
Yeah. All right. Jim, did you have anything else? No. Okay. Council member reports and recommendations.
Just one. I wanted to mention that Madge and I set a date for the next mobile vendor ad hoc meeting, which is February 27th. It's a Thursday, 6 p.m. here in the council chambers. We've put together an ordinance. I've already sent out email, texts, and phone calls for everybody who's reached out to us, which there has been many. And I'm in the process of typing up what we came up with in a format that we hope won't cause too much extra work if it seems like it's something that...
I wouldn't call what we've got an ordinance. It's a set of policies, proposed policies
You'll
that would guide the ordinance.
We took other cities and their framework and we changed what we liked and didn't like, and you'll be getting that shortly. Yeah.
And we had a very large, pretty good turnout for the public ad hoc committee that we had on whatever date it was. And we had a lot of different views. And so it really comes down to what we can legally do. And then Sabrina and I are just sort of putting our heads together about what we think is sort of maneuvering the best kind of compromise between those who want lots of restrictions and those who want everything open. So we're trying to find the middle ground, and I think that was kind of what we took our charge to be with the ad hoc committee. So.
I would say that I was impressed with the number of people. We had a good turnout at the meeting, and then we got quite a few emails with information of where they wanted us, other information they wanted us to see. So I would say about 30 people were actively involved with this, so I was pleased.
And the other thing that I wanted to report is that both Jerry and I went to the planning conference that was held at Sonoma State University on February 1st, and it was from 8:30 or so to 1. Had a lot of really good information and covered a lot of territory. I should write up my notes from it because and give them to Dusty at least. A lot of what they talked about was fire prevent
Resiliency, right?
yeah, resiliency, preparedness, how to avoid development in areas that are going to just be fire dangers to the people who live there, and building standards, a lot of things that we actually, most of us now have heard in other places as well, but it was very well presented. And then they also talked about, I'm trying to remember all the things.
Transit.
Oh, yeah, transit and pedestrian, trying to reduce vehicle miles traveled. Also a little bit about the state of the law on how far you can go with regulation before you start considering it to be a taking of private property. This is something that the planning world has lived with forever. It doesn't go away, and different court decisions sort of come out differently, but it's basically always in play. If you regulate private development, how far can you go and what's justified and what's considered taking of private property. If you want to add anything?
No, I think you covered the highlights there, and it was represented by most of the North Bay folks there, so some of it was probably old hat for Madge. For me, it was kind of interesting, but it's kind of like trying to present to you these big issues and trying to do it all within a 3-hour span. I don't think it did it justice. So, and they had all the planning department students there were helping out, and actually we're even doing parking direction out in the parking lot. So, and I hadn't been to Sonoma State in years, and I graduated from there back in '87. So it was kind of a fun trip back into my youth. So
I think it was very worthwhile to go to it. Just a primer. Keep us on our toes.
Larry, do you have anything? Nothing. All right. Any good in welfare?
Nothing this week?
All right, I know that the Sober Grad has a tri-tip dinner coming up. I believe it's not this week, but next week.
Yeah.
Thank you, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. I knew it was coming up, so get a hold of a Sober Grad kid or go up to the high school. I think they still have tickets. So, and Stephanie, you have your...
I had a quick thing. The Rotary is having a benefit for Willits High School scholarships on March 7th, and it's going to be here in the community center. Sideline, which is a pretty famous bluegrass band that won Song of the Year, and I'll be cooking Southern Supper with a few other people. And tickets, call me for tickets.
That reminds me that the prayer breakfast was held a week and a half or so ago, and it was very beautiful, for one thing, just the way they decorate that hall, and the food was really good, and the prayers were really good, and the keynote speaker was fascinating, and everybody got a book written by her, and I've read it already, and it was really interesting about doing medical, basically volunteer work in Togo, West Africa, and it's just, very, very emotional.
Yeah, thank you, Adventist Health, for putting that on. I always look forward to that every year.
Yeah, I had to miss it this year, and the first one I missed in a long time, so
It's okay, you're going to eat enough food for both of us.
there you go.
I didn't see you eat much.
All right, we have 2 items for closed session. Conference with legal counsel pursuant Government Code 54956.9B, anticipated litigation. 1 case, and item C, public pursuant to Government Code 54957, public employee annual performance evaluation, city manager. All right, I'll report out if there's something to report out. Thank you, everybody. And I did, while we're still on TV land, I just want to thank Scott for his service. We do want to recognize you, even if it's for a few minutes at a future meeting. I thought you were going to be at that next meeting. So.
Yeah, I did too. We have some things for you, so.
You'll have to come in March. At the
Come and
beginning.
run.
We are having a
Luncheon, see.
Yeah, if you want to come to a council party.